Hello. Have you ever heard of SCHAPSSIE and his little friend Bounce? Well, SCHNAPSIE's a dog, a beautiful red dachshund. And Bounce? Well, he's a little green man, a fairy's helper. Well, ever since the day that Bounce flew in the window of SCHNAPSIE's room and gave him a magic button, they've had many delightful and exciting adventures. And with the help of the magic button, SCHNAPSIE can talk, sing, and fly. Why, he can even... No, I won't tell you any more. Just listen now, and you'll hear for yourself. It was Saturday morning, and little did SCHNAPSIE realize how important this day was to be. His mistress was at the window, calling excitedly to him. SCHNAPSIE, SCHNAPSIE, come here. It's the first snowfall of your little life. SCHNAPSIE yawned and stretched his long dachshund body as he thought to himself, Snow? What's snow? Well, I better go over and give it a look or two. She's my boss and I love her. But she does bother me at the oddest times. Oh, well. So he stretched once more and padded his little paws over to the window where she picked him up to see what was going on. He saw white, fluttery things coming down from the sky, millions of them. He pressed his long nose against the window pane, but then he jumped back a little because it was so cold. And he thought, where are they? I wonder if it's going to be like this forever. Gee, will I ever see the sun again? SCHNAPSIE loved the sun. He was a little afraid of this strange thing that was happening. You see, everybody's a little afraid of something they don't understand. Well, even grown-ups are afraid of the unknown. Then his mistress put him down and said, Oh, SCHNAPSIE, I'm late. I forgot about that appointment. And she raced around the apartment getting dressed. And SCHNAPSIE went back to his bed to puzzle out this new thing. Gee, I wonder what it is. When my mistress goes out, I'm going to call Bounce with the help of my magic button. He'll tell me. Well, if anybody had seen SCHNAPSIE at this moment, they'd have had to laugh, for he was in another of his thinking poses. His long body was half in and half out of his bed, with his feet stretched out behind him, and his two front paws crossed over his head with his eyes closed. He looked like a swimming alligator with a headache. Well, his mistress was ready to go now, and she said, Goodbye, SCHNAPSIE. Be a good boy until Mr. Danders takes you out at 12. SCHNAPSIE gave her one of those soulful looks that little children and small dogs give at a time like this. You know, one of those, you think I'm a baby looks. Well, as soon as SCHNAPSIE heard the door close, he sat up, gave a long, long sigh, and touched his magic button. He watched the window for his friend Bounce, the fairy's helper. Way up high in fairyland, Bounce's ears tickled. He knew it was a summons from SCHNAPSIE, so he quickly grabbed a long icicle and held it in his hands while he ran the length of a cloud and belly flopped down on his strange sled. Well, on the way down, he thought of a way to play a trick on SCHNAPSIE. You see, he knew that SCHNAPSIE always looked for him through a window in his mistress's bedroom. So he came in another window, right behind SCHNAPSIE, and touched him with the icicle just where SCHNAPSIE usually sits down. Oh! SCHNAPSIE was so surprised that he jumped right up into his mistress's bed and buried himself under the covers. And Bounce laughed so hard that he fell off his slippery sled right on his nose.
Schnapsy warily poked his long nose from under the covers, and then he jumped down from the bed and helped Bounce up from the floor.
Hey, Bounce, what's snow?
Snow? Why, snow is a million little pieces of moisture that Mother Nature, with the help of Mr. Winter, changed into a lot of flakes of cold, flying feathers. Ooh, it's lots of fun.
Say, Bounce, could I go out in the snow? Bounce, could I, huh?
Sure. Wait just a minute till I put your little green sweater and little green hat on to keep you warm. Here now, come on. Stop licking my face. Snopsy, stop it. There you are. Come on now, let's go.
And then they both jumped on Bounce's icicle and flew out the window.
Whee!
He was about to do a backflip when Bounce restrained him, saying,
Hey, hold on to the icicle or you'll fall off.
So Schnapsy held on to the icicle and joined Bounce in singing,
You look sweet upon the seat of an icicle built for two.
Schnapsy thought it was such fun flying along, feeling millions of cold, feathery, fluttery things on his face and singing with Bounce. A little cold, but lots of fun. Soon they were out in the country, and they saw a crowd of people around a frozen lake, and they seemed to be gliding along.
Hey, Bounce, what are they doing?
They're ice skating.
Well, can we go down and watch them, huh? Could we, huh, Bounce?
Sure.
And he pointed the icicle down away from the crowd so that nobody would see them, and they landed on the ground.
Schnapsy, I'd better become invisible so that no one can see me, but you can go over there and see what's going on.
So Schnapsy walked right up to the crowd, among lots of feet, and he came out next to a little boy who was watching the ice skating with his sister.
Hello, doggy.
And the little boy put his arm around Schnapsy and looked at his identification tag. And then he turned to his little sister, who was holding a doll, and said,
His name is Schnapsy. Isn't he beautiful?
The little girl smiled and held out her doll to Schnapsy.
See? My doll is an ice skater. She has skates on.
And the boy looked at the doll's skates and then at Schnapsy's feet. They were the same size.
Here, Schnapsy, hold still and I'll put these ice skates on you. Then you can skate too.
So Schnapsy let him put them on his hind feet. And the people started laughing because they thought that the little dachshund was going to look awfully funny sliding around on the ice. But Schnapsy thought to himself,
I'll show 'em. I will.
Then the little boy stood Schnapsy up on the skates. And Schnapsy touched his magic button and glided beautifully across the ice over to the judges, who were watching the contestants in the National Ice Skating Contest of the World. Skaters from every nation were participating, and each was the champion of his own country. But Schnapsy, completely unconcerned, began to whirl right in front of them. Everyone became very quiet as they watched Schnapsy doing pirouettes. Well, of course, nobody saw Bounce, who was invisible, lifting Schnapsy into the air, whirling him around, and helping him do the most difficult somersaults, always landing right on his feet. One Strosselheim of Germany said,
What is this? It is incredible. In America, they have skating dachshunds. We invent them, and America always goes this one better. Oh, what a country. Skating dachshunds. Oh.
Schnapsy's performance was so great that the judges were about to award him first prize when Bounce whispered,
Hey, Schnapsy, it's almost 12 o'clock. We must get home before Mr. Danders arrives.
So Schnapsy skated over to the little girl, slipped out of the skates, ran over to Bounce, jumped on Bounce's icicle sled, and they flew home as fast as they could, landing in the apartment just before Mr. Danders. Bounce was ready to leave, but Schnapsy said,
Bounce, your sled melted a little on the floor. Please, would you wipe it up before I get blamed for something I didn't do?
Well, Bounce giggled, scooped up the water, and flew right out the window. Mr. Danders came into the bedroom, mumbling to himself.
Flying dachshunds. Oh, Schnapsy, it's too bad you don't know what I'm saying, or you'd really laugh. Little Bobby next door said that he saw you flying around in the air with a little green man. His mother and father put him to bed and called the doctor. Funny the things that kids think up these days.
But Schnapsy didn't think it was funny. And he thought to himself,
Poor Bobby. When I see him again, I'll give him an extra big kiss for the trouble I've caused. No, even better. Bounce and I can take him along with us on our next adventure. Wowee!
Schnapsy was very restless this morning. He just couldn't wait till his mistress left the house. Oh, it wasn't that he didn't love her. No, it was just that he had one of his great ideas, and he wanted to call his little playmate Bounce and tell him about it. As soon as mistress finished dressing and the door closed behind her, Schnapsy wiggled his little red dachshund's body, and his right paw reached up for the magic button hanging from his collar. He gave a long sigh and touched the button. Then he waited for his friend Bounce, the fairy's helper. Way up high in fairyland, Bounce was very, very busy. You see, it was just before winter, and the fairies wanted to be sure that all the people in fairy tales would be kept warm. It was Bounce's job to take care of 2 houses. Well, he had just finished counting the coal for Hansel and Gretel's house, and was just starting to count the coal in Snow White and the dwarf's house, when he felt that tickly feeling in his ears that meant that Schnapsy wanted him. Well, he became so flustered that he slipped and fell down on a big pile of coal and smudged up his suit. Oh, was he mad?
Boy, am I mad.
You see, if he didn't come quickly, Schnapsy might say to him,
What's the matter, Bounce? Getting old?
well, you know that nobody wants to be laughed at, and Bounce didn't know what to do. He had to finish his job before he went to play with Schnapsy, for he didn't want to disappoint his mistress, the Blue Fairy. You see, she was always very nice to him, and Bounce wanted to do everything she told him. Well, this was quite a problem. But all of a sudden, Bounce got an idea. He called all his firefly friends and told them to each pick out a piece of coal and land on it. Then he told them to call out a number in rotation. Well, Frankie Firefly said
1,
and Freddie Firefly said
2.
Then Flossie Firefly said 3. And before you knew it, Bounce had the total amount of the coal in the cellar of the house. He quickly called a parakeet and told it how much there was and to fly to the Blue Fairy and repeat the message. And then he hopped on a fast express sunbeam and flew straight to Schnapsy's. He came in the window like a jet airplane, swooped over Schnapsy's nose, and skidded to a landing. But he miscalculated and went plop right in Schnapsy's bowl of water. Schnapsy saw this and laughed and laughed. Poor Bounce crawled out, looking like a little wet sparrow.
Oh, boy, am I wet.
But he shook himself, said a few magic words,
Whittle-dee-dee, whittle-dee-die. Please, magic words, make me dry.
and immediately he was dry and didn't have even a smudge of coal on him.
Hello, Schnapsy, old boy, old kid. It was quite a to-do-to-you-do getting down here on time. But you see, I made it. I sure hope you have a good idea, because after all that's happened to me, I'd certainly like to have some fun.
Oh, I have a real good one this time. I was watching television last night, and my mistress had a movie on. It had race drivers in it. Oh, boy, everybody had fast, souped-up cars. They went round and round the track like a million. Boy, oh, boy, I'd like to do that. Wowee!
Hey, that does seem like a good idea, Schnapsy. You know, I never raced in a car before. I'd like to do that, too.
Well, then, let's go.
And they both were so happy that they did backflips right up onto a beautiful golden sunbeam, and off they flew. It was a wonderfully warm summer day, and pretty soon they heard the sound of racing cars below them.
Wait a minute, Schnapsy. We can't go down like this. What would everybody think if we just walked over to a car and got in and drove off? After all, Schnapsy, you're a dachshund, and me, I'm a little green man. Everybody'd think that the heat had gotten them. They wouldn't believe their eyes.
I know what we can do, Bounce.
What?
Well, with my magic button and your magic touch, we can both become race drivers.
Hey, that's a good idea, Schnapsy.
So they glided to a spot away from the crowds. Bounce said the magic words.
Whittledy-dee, whittledy-fivers. We want to look like race drivers.
As Schnapsy touched his magic button, and they grew as big as two men. There they were, all dressed up in their racing clothes.
But where's our car?
Oh, I can fix that. Let's go over to that vegetable garden.
So they walked over to the garden, and Bounce picked up a cucumber and touched it. And it turned into a beautiful green racing car.
Here you are, Schnapsy. It's a pickle 6, and it has a jet engine.
Woo-wee! I like that. Well, how about your car, Bounce?
Well, now, let me see. Hey, Schnapsy, I have a good one. Boy, oh boy, wait till you see my car.
And he picked up a big yellow squash and touched it. And there stood a bright yellow racing car. Then Bounce took a can of yellow paint and painted Schnapsie's Special on Schnapsie's car. Next, he took a can of green paint and painted the words Bounce's Special on his.
See, Schnapsy? We both have the colors of green and yellow, and we're a team. If either one of us wins, we'll bring home our team's colors.
And then they both got in their cars, covered their eyes with their goggles, and drove up to the starting line. The tension mounted, the starter's flag dropped, and away they roared. The radio announcer was calling out the positions.
They are now rounding the first turn, and in the lead is Schnapsie's Special. Here he comes. In second position is Bounce's Special. Look out, you better duck. Here he goes up very close. All the other cars are pouring on the speed to catch up. There they are, wheel to wheel. What a race. All the most famous drivers in the world are qualifying. Just look at them go around that track. The car that wins this race has got to be good.
Schnapsie was having the time of his life. His foot was down on the gas pedal, and his long nose was hunched over the cowling of the car. The wind roared by and lifted his helmet up a little, and out poked his ears. The driver in number 3 car squinted his eyes and gulped once or twice when he saw Schnapsie's long ears flopping in the breeze and his long nose poking over the steering wheel.
There must be something wrong with my eyes. I'm seeing things. Maybe if I pass him, it will all go away.
Well, he shoved his accelerator to the floorboards, roared up to Schnapsie, and was just about to pass when Bounce saw him. Well, now, Bounce didn't want him to pass Schnapsie, so he took off his goggles and his helmet and went... Well, when number 3 saw a little green man making funny faces at him, and when Schnapsie saw Bounce take off his helmet and goggles, he did the same thing. Well, number 3 car became number 23 car. And all the other drivers coming up to pass took a look and saw the same thing. So they all lost speed and fell back. Schnapsie and Bounce raced over the finish line wheel to wheel, and the crowd roared. And Bounce called out,
Schnapsy, it's almost 12 o'clock, and Mr. Danders will be looking for you. Come on, let's go.
So they both became their natural selves again, hopped on a sunbeam and flew to Schnapsie's home. Meanwhile, the judges of the race went down to the track to present the trophy cups to Schnapsie and Bounce as winners. But were they surprised when all they found was a cucumber and a squash. And in the distance, they heard a dog barking and a little voice crying out,
You know, Schnapsy, It did, Joe. It did, Joe.
As soon as Schnapsie heard the apartment door close behind his mistress, he rushed to the window and looked out. It was a beautiful day, and the sun shone down and touched everything with its marvelous glow of gold. Schnapsie stretched his long dachshund body, wagged his tail, and cocked his lovely head at a bluebird sailing by. He felt so good that he wanted to share his wonderful feeling with someone else. So he gave a long sigh and touched his magic button to summon his friend Bounce. Way up high in fairyland, Bounce the fairy's helper was hard at work. He was on rainbow duty. This consisted of feeding beautiful colored mist into a machine to make gorgeously tinted rainbows. He was working with other fairies' helpers, and they were making many, many rainbows. You see, there are many things in life that are nice besides toys and candy, and it's one of the duties of fairies to show people just how wonderful life can be. And since one of the most beautiful things in the world is a rainbow, fairies very often make them and set them in the sky for everyone to see. Well, Bounce felt his ears begin to tickle. He knew that Schnapsie was calling him, so he excused himself and grabbed the first express sunbeam, and away he flew.
I wonder what Schnapsie is up to now.
And then he zoomed right in the window of Schnapsie's apartment, sailed his little blue hat with the long feather right across the room, and it landed just over Schnapsie's 2 ears and covered one eye.
Hello, Schnapsie. What's cooking, old boy, old boy?
Oh, hi, Bounce. Well, my mistress just left, and I was lonely. It's such a beautiful day. I feel like doing something,
Wait a
and
minute,
I thought...
wait a minute. You have me worn out just listening to you. What would you like to do, Schnapsie? Where would you like to go?
Bounce, can we go to the dog show? I heard him announce it on television just a little while ago.
Say, now that's a good idea, Schnapsie. Sure, let's go.
So Schnapsie and Bounce leaped up into the air, right on the nearest sunbeam, and off they went. Bounce made believe that he was a conductor and called out,
Tickets, tickets, get your tickets here. This is the express to the dog show.
As soon as Schnapsie and Bounce landed near the entrance to Madison Square Garden, where the dog show was being held. It was a little late, and everybody was inside. Bounce became invisible and whispered into Schnapsie's ear.
What do we do now?
Well, let's see.
Suddenly, Schnapsie noticed a little boy holding a funny little dog and crying.
He's not a mutt. He's the best dog in the whole wide world.
Say, Bounce, what's the matter?
I'll find out. What's the trouble, little fellow? I'm a fairy's helper. You can't see me right now, but, well, maybe I can help.
Little Johnny was so surprised that he stopped crying.
I wanted to enter my dog in the show, but the people all laughed at him, and they told me to take him away, that he was just a little mutt, that he was good for nothing, and that he had no pedigree at all.
Well, I know a lot of dogs that have no pedigree, but they're good dogs, and many of them have saved people's lives. Let me see now. What can we do about this?
Hey, Bounce, come here.
What is it, Schnapsie? You got an idea?
So Schnapsie whispered into his ear, and Bounce started laughing. He laughed so hard that he gasped when he tried to talk. But the little boy seemed to feel that everything was going to be all right.
Look, Sonny, this dachshund is Schnapsie, and he's a very nice and a very friendly dog. Besides, he has a magic button that lets him do just about everything. Well, everything except talk to people. You just follow him inside, And don't you say a word.
Then Bounce walked over to Schnapsie and touched his forehead. At the same time, Schnapsie touched his magic button. And suddenly he grew as tall as a man.
Gee, Bounce, my magic button and your magic touch. What a combination.
And then as magic can be, a tall silk hat appeared on Schnapsie's head. A suit of the finest dress clothes, complete with black cape, adorned his body. And a long cigarette holder appeared between his lips. And a pair of dark glasses popped right over his nose. Well, little Johnny just stared and stared.
You go ahead, Schnapsie, and I'll do the talking. Being invisible, nobody will see me, and they'll think that you're doing the talking. Oh, just a minute, Schnapsie. I forgot something.
And he snapped his finger in front of the left lapel of Schnapsie's coat. And there appeared a badge proclaiming Schnapsie one of the top judges in the show. Schnapsie walked up to one of the guards, and Bounce, just above his head, said in a very impressive voice,
What do you mean by keeping Johnny and his beautiful Palookie out of the show?
Palookie? I never heard of a dog like that.
Your knowledge of dogs is certainly lacking, sir. A Palookie is a very wonderful, rare dog.
And then he walked Johnny and the puppy, which was now a rare Palookie, right into the show and up to the other judges. Well, Schnapsie opened his mouth, just as though he were talking, and addressed the judges.
Well, look what we have here. A beautiful, rare Palookie.
I say, what is this, a joke?
Why, it's nothing but a mutt.
Just a moment. I shall prove it to you.
Then Schnapsie took from the table the most authoritative dog book in the world, which explained all about the various kinds of dogs. But nobody saw him touch it with his magic button. And he held it out to the judges, and they looked and looked. For there, right before their very eyes, was a picture of Johnny's puppy. It described him perfectly and said that this was a Palookie, a very rare and wonderful dog. And then Schnapsie took all the books that were in the judging box and touched them with his magic button. And each one had the same information about Palookies. Well, very soon the judges were clustered around Johnny's puppy and admiring him.
Why, really, I knew right away that this dog was a Palookie.
Oh, look at his head, look at his nose, just look at his beautiful stance.
Yes, he is the best dog that I've ever seen.
Well, Johnny stuck out his chest with pride and said,
Why, he's the best dog in the whole wide world, and I love him.
And they pinned a blue ribbon to his collar, took his picture with Johnny for the newspapers, and awarded him the prize as best dog in the show.
Say, Schnapsie, we've got to go now. It's time for Mr. Danders to take you out.
And they left the dog show so rapidly that the amazed people saw a dachshund running out of a full dress suit with a pair of sunglasses on his nose and still smoking a cigarette in a long holder. Down the aisle, Schnapsie and Bounce dashed. When they got outside, they jumped on a fast express sunbeam and flew in the apartment window, just as Mr. Danders put the key in the door.
So long, Schnapsie. Toodoo-doo-doo.
And off he went. Mr. Danders came in, shaking his head.
You know, Schnapsie, I just saw on television that a boy named Johnny won the dog show with a dog called a Palookie. You know, it looked just like a dog I once bought for $5. Am I sorry that I gave him away? Just imagine. I once owned a Palookie.
Mr. Danders thought that Schnapsie had a coughing fit because he fell on the floor with his paw over his nose and was making the strangest noises. But you and Bounce and I know what Schnapsie was doing and why he was laughing, don't we? Well, on this particular day, Schnapsie had been alone only 10 minutes, and here he was, bored already. He was in one of his thinking moods. Well, he was lying down, at least the back half was, leaning on his little right elbow. The other front paw was scratching the tip of his nose. He was wondering what his friend Bounce, the fairy's helper, was doing. So he gave a long sigh, touched the magic button, and waited for Bounce. Now, way up high in Fairyland, Bounce was in Peach Factory number 12, stuffing pits into peaches. He had been doing this for a whole week. You see, the peach growers in Oregon were expecting a big crop this year, and peaches must have pits. Well, the fairies didn't want them to be disappointed, so they had their helpers working overtime. Bounce felt his ears tickling. They always did when Schnapsie called him, so he gave a little leap into the air, landed on a beautiful yellow sunbeam, and down to Schnapsie he went.
Hello, Schnapsie, old buddy. How are you? What's new?
Well, I was feeling kind of lonely, Bounce. I missed you.
Well, I'm sure glad you called me. I never want to see another peach as long as I live.
Say, Bounce, we always go where I want. How about going where you want to go? For this time, I mean. Well, even if you want to go another time, too. Where'd you like to go? Huh, Bounce, huh?
Let me see. I don't... Oh, yeah. Schnapsie, I just read in the Fairyland newspaper that the orphan home just had a new orphan come to live with them.
An orphan? What's an orphan?
It's a little boy or girl who hasn't any mother or father. Can you imagine being without a mother or father? It's very hard for a small child, for they don't have anybody to look after them. And this new one's a little girl.
Gee, what would I do without my mistress? She takes care of me, and I love her so much, well, I think of her as my mother. What's the little girl's name?
It's Jane, and everybody calls her Janie.
Can we play with Janie? Maybe we can take her with us on an adventure, huh, Bounce? Let's take her with us. Boy, will she have fun. Boy, oh boy. Let's go. Let's go now.
So Schnapsie and Bounce hopped on a sunbeam, and out the window they flew. Soon they glided onto the top porch of the orphanage. They opened the door and quietly tiptoed down the carpeted hallway. They came to a large room with many beds in it. It was empty, except for one little girl sitting on the edge of a bed, softly crying.
Janie.
The little girl turned her head and saw a small green man with a beautiful red dachshund right next to him. Why, she was so surprised she even forgot to cry, and the last 2 tears went plink, plink, right off the end of her nose.
Who are you?
I'm Bounce, and I'm a fairy's helper. This is my friend, Schnapsie. He's a dachshund, and he does tricks. Come on, show Janie what you can do, Schnapsie.
Well, first Schnapsie did a backflip, and then he sneezed, and then he rolled over on his back, wagging his tail. Well, Janie laughed and clapped her hands, and Schnapsie and Bounce laughed too. Because they saw that Janie was happy and her tears had stopped.
Janie, why are you alone?
Oh, all the girls are at class, and I don't start until tomorrow.
Would you like to go somewhere with us? We can't stay too long because Mr. Danders takes Schnapsie out at 12. But we do have 2 hours, and with Schnapsie's magic button, we can go anywhere, and fast.
Oh, please take me with you.
Sure.
Schnapsie wiggled his body and wagged his tail excitedly.
Janie, where would you like to go?
Well, I understand that there's a doll land where all the dolls live before they're sold in the stores, and that they can walk and talk all by themselves.
Yes, that's right, Janie. Now you just get on Schnapsie's back. Good. Hold your magic button, Schnapsie. And away we go!
It was the cutest thing you ever saw. There was a red dachshund with a little freckle-faced girl on his back, her 2 long pigtails flying in the wind, and a little green man hanging onto the end of Schnapsie's tail. Soon they were high in the sky, flying on a sunbeam, on their way to Dollland. But in the distance, they saw one of the strangest but loveliest cities they had ever seen. It was composed of countless doll houses, every size, shape, and color you could imagine. And in the streets, there were millions of dolls walking and talking, going into stores to buy their food. You see, dolls are just like people before they live with them. And then they depend upon little girls and boys to take care of them with love and affection. And before a doll is shipped to a store, it's given instructions on how to live with people, such as always do as you're told, always think nice thoughts, and send those thoughts right into the minds of little girls and boys. And of course, never talk to the other toys until everybody's in bed and sound asleep. The dolls go to school, and they do homework. They even get report cards. And when they graduate, then they go to live with little girls and boys. Well, Schnapsie steered his sunbeam down and landed near a doll traffic officer who said,
Well, now, and who might you be?
I'm Bounce, a fairy's helper, and this is Schnapsie. He does tricks and has a magic button. And this is Janie.
And you've come to visit Dollland, eh? Well, now you go right ahead and have a nice time.
So Schnapsie, Bounce, and Janie walked around and looked at everything. The mayor of Dollland came up to them and gave them the key to the city and rode them around in an official car with little flags on it. And as they passed a doll school, Janie asked if they could visit the classes and see the dolls studying. So he took them to Doll University, where the principal took them on a tour of the school. In one of the classrooms, the dolls were studying the history of happiness. And little Janie saw a small doll who looked exactly like her, freckles and all. Oh, Janie fell in love with her and wished that she could have her. Well, Bounce noticed this, and he whispered to the mayor, who in turn whispered to the principal. And as they were leaving, the principal gave Janie a box and told her that it was a present from everybody in Dollland. Well, right then, Bounce said,
Let's go, Schnapsie. It's time.
So Schnapsie jumped on the nearest express sunbeam with Janie on his back and Bounce holding his tail, and away they flew. Soon they were back at the orphanage, and Janie waved goodbye from the porch. And then she ran to her room and opened her present. Well, Schnapsie and Bounce, they just couldn't resist peeking through the window. And what do you think Janie took from the box? That's right. It was the little doll that looked exactly like her. Why, she was so happy she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She held the doll in her arms and kissed her over and over again. Schnapsie and Bounce felt so wonderful inside. You know, just as we all do when we've done something nice for somebody else. And they flew into Schnapsie's room, just as Mr. Danders put the key in the door. Bounce waved Schnapsie goodbye, as out the window he flew, right back to Fairyland. Mr. Danders came in muttering.
Dollland. Who believes in that? Schnapsie, if you could understand, you'd actually laugh. You know what I just heard? A little girl at the orphanage is telling everybody that she was in Dollland and that the dolls talk and walk and eat and even go to school. What an imagination.
Schnapsie turned his head away so that Mr. Danders couldn't see him laughing. But he laughed so hard that he started rolling on the floor.
You know, Schnapsie, sometimes I think you do understand.